Jax O'Connor strode through the gleaming white halls of the Galactic Academy, feeling the weight of every skeptical gaze that followed him. At 24, he was one of the youngest cadets in the institution, and as a human, he stood out like a thorn among the roses. The other cadets, tall, regal, and multi-limbed, wore their superiority like armor. To them, humanity was a footnote in galactic history, a species too new, too raw to have earned a place among the stars. But Jax didn't care. He'd earned his spot in this prestigious academy through sheer force of will. While his peers boasted about their technologically advanced homeworlds and centuries of interstellar experience, Jax had come from Earth, a modest colony on the edge of the galaxy. To them, it was laughable. To him, it was a challenge. Today, however, was different. Today would be the day he proved them wrong. He was determined to make them respect humanity, not because of technology, but because of something far more dangerous: adaptability. "Hey, O'Connor!" A voice cut through his thoughts. It was Zorna, a Zither cadet with a long tail and scales that shimmered like emeralds. She was sharp-tongued and unrelenting in her disdain for humans, and she made no effort to hide her amusement at Jax's expense. "What's it like knowing your species isn't even good enough to get a real weapon?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension as she flicked her tail in Jax's direction. Jax shot her a sideways glance, unfazed by the jab. "You know," he replied coolly. "On Earth, we don't need fancy tech to survive. We get by just fine with what we have." Zorna laughed, the sound like a hiss, and walked away without another word. Jax didn't care. He knew exactly what she thought of him and his people. What mattered was proving her, and everyone else, wrong. Ahead of him, the large doors to the Academy's main hall swung open. The grand chamber was filled with cadets, each from a different species, their uniforms as diverse as their appearances. Some were humanoid, others insectoid or reptilian. Each one of them had an air of superiority, and as they filed in, their eyes lingered on Jax, sizing him up. At the front of the room stood Fellner Zither, the towering instructor with gleaming green scales and cold, calculating eyes. His presence alone was enough to silence any room. The Zither were known for their intellect and their ruthlessness, and Fellner was no exception. Jax had crossed paths with him more than once, always finding himself on the receiving end of his withering looks. "Cadets," Fellner's deep voice echoed, silencing the room. "Today's challenge will test your creativity and resourcefulness. You will be tasked with constructing a weapon of your own design. You will have access to a variety of materials here, but remember, this is not just about brute strength. This is about innovation. Adaptability. Whoever fails to impress will not advance." Jax felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The Academy had set the stage for a test of intellect and resourcefulness, and Jax knew his moment to shine had arrived. Fellner's cold eyes swept over the room, as if calculating who would fail first. "I expect you to think outside the box," he continued. "We live in a galaxy of limitless technology, but it's the mind that makes a weapon truly powerful. You may choose any material in this room, but I want you to remember, there are no second chances." With a swift gesture, Fellner pointed toward the far side of the hall, where a heap of materials lay. Metal rods, scrap wood, circuit boards, wires, and various high-tech components were piled together, waiting for the cadets to shape them into their creations. As the cadets rushed forward, eager to prove themselves, Jax remained still, observing the scene carefully. His mind raced as he scanned the pile of materials. His fellow cadets were already selecting parts for laser rifles and plasma blades, choosing their weapons based on brute force and technological advantage. But Jax didn't need that. He had something else in mind, something they wouldn't expect. The noise of the other cadets creating weapons filled the air, but Jax remained focused. His gaze fell on a wooden chair pushed against the wall, its leg broken. An idea sparked in his mind. It was simple, it was raw, but it had the potential to be exactly what he needed. He moved toward it, his boots making a soft thud against the polished floor. As he approached, a couple of cadets glanced at him, exchanging amused looks. One of them, a Grackle, a muscular alien with 4 arms, snickered. "What's he going to do? Use a chair leg for his weapon?" Jax didn't respond. He simply pulled the chair leg free and looked at it, his fingers tracing the smooth, worn wood. It wasn't the sleek, futuristic weapon his peers were building. It wasn't a weapon designed for quick power or destruction. But it was practical, and it had a simplicity that Jax admired. He set to work, using his sharp edge to carve the wood into a sharp point. The process was slow but steady. The other cadets continued their work, oblivious to what he was doing. They were focused on their high-tech gadgets, convinced that anything without glowing lights or advanced circuitry wouldn't stand a chance. "Jax, what the hell is that?" Zorna's voice cut through the air. "A chair leg? Are you seriously going to fight with that?" Jax looked up and met her gaze, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "You'd be surprised how effective it can be," he said, his voice steady. Zorna sneered but didn't respond. She turned away, clearly dismissing him as nothing more than a joke. The rest of the room continued to buzz with activity as Jax carved and shaped the wood into a spear. His technique wasn't fancy, but it was effective. The wooden shaft was sturdy, and the sharp point would do its job when it came time to test his weapon. When he finally finished, he stood back and surveyed his creation. A simple spear. Nothing more. But in his hands it was a tool, a weapon born of necessity and ingenuity. He could already imagine the looks on his classmates' faces when he proved it would work. He picked up the spear, his fingers curling around its smooth, familiar handle. The feeling of it in his hand was enough to convince him that he had made the right choice. This wasn't about high-tech gadgets or complex designs. This was about using what you had and making it work. Jax turned toward Fellner, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "This is my weapon," Jax said simply, holding up the spear for everyone to see. The room fell silent. Fellner's eyes narrowed as he looked at Jax, a trace of disbelief crossing his face. "A chair leg?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is your weapon?" Jax didn't flinch. "I believe it's more than enough." Fellner's lips curled into a thin smile, but it wasn't one of approval. "We shall see, Cadet O'Connor. We shall see." The arena was massive, a circular pit that stretched out beneath a vast glass dome, with the planet Zoxer's crimson sky visible above. The Academy had designed it to test cadets in combat situations, and Jax had been in it more than once, though never under such scrutiny. This time, however, everything was different. "Cadet O'Connor, step forward." Fellner's voice cut through the tense air, commanding attention. The massive Zither stood tall on the elevated platform overlooking the arena, his reptilian eyes fixed on Jax. Jax wasn't fazed. He had been here before. What was about to happen, though, was something new. This wasn't just any test. Fellner had a point to prove, and the whole Academy was watching. The other cadets were scattered around the perimeter of the arena, their gazes filled with mockery or disbelief as they observed the human cadet and his primitive weapon. Jax could feel their eyes boring into him, but he focused on the task at hand. He didn't need their approval. He only needed to prove something far more important, that humanity wasn't just some naive species to be looked down upon. As he stepped into the center of the arena, Jax caught the faintest smirk on Fellner's face. The Zither instructor's cold gaze flicked to the large metallic door on the opposite side of the pit. Without a word, he gestured toward the door, signaling the start of the test. A low growl echoed from behind it. The cadets stiffened, eyes wide with anticipation. Jax tightened his grip on the chair-leg-turned spear. The weapon, though simple, felt solid in his hands. He was about to face the kind of combat scenario that could determine his future here at the Academy, and if he failed, it would be another nail in the coffin for humanity's place in the galaxy. The door screeched open, revealing a hulking beast. A mock alien predator, genetically engineered for training, emerged from the shadows. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its skin armored with jagged plates and spines that gleamed in the artificial light. The creature's mandibles clicked together as it stalked forward, its 4 muscular legs propelling it with terrifying speed. Its eyes glowed with a predatory hunger. The cadets leaned forward, eager for the spectacle. They were all expecting a quick and brutal end for Jax. A creature of this size and power would crush him in an instant, especially with a simple wooden spear. But Jax didn't move. He stood still, waiting. "Fight, Cadet O'Connor!" Fellner barked, his voice cold and mocking. Jax nodded, his eyes locked on the creature. The predator roared, its sharp claws scraping against the ground as it charged, the ground shaking beneath its weight. Jax didn't flinch. He took one step back, letting the creature come at him. As the predator lunged, Jax sidestepped, narrowly avoiding its claws. The beast snarled, its massive jaws snapping at him. Jax raised the spear, parrying the predator's strike with a swift twist of his wrist. The sharp point of his weapon scraped along the creature's thick hide but failed to pierce it. The cadets gasped, but Jax wasn't deterred. He was looking for an opening, something the predator didn't expect. The beast growled, swinging its clawed arm at him again, this time aiming for his head. Jax ducked low and spun around, using the momentum to thrust the spear into the creature's side. The blow landed hard, right in the gap between 2 armor plates. The predator shrieked in pain, stumbling back. For a moment, everything was still. Jax's heart raced, but his hands were steady. The predator's blood spurted from the wound, hissing and sizzling as it hit the arena floor. He had done it. His simple weapon had found a weak spot, one that the advanced weapons of his fellow cadets had missed. The creature let out another ear-piercing roar, enraged and disoriented. It charged again, more vicious this time, but Jax was ready. He shifted his weight, planted his feet, and dodged the strike just as the beast lunged at him. This time, he was prepared. The spear in his hands was no longer just a weapon, it was an extension of his will, an answer to the creature's fury. Jax gripped the spear firmly, and aimed for the exposed underside of the predator's throat. The beast's mouth opened wide, showing a row of sharp teeth as it tried to snap at him. With a grunt, Jax drove the spear forward, plunging it into the creature's throat. It thrashed, but the force of Jax's strike had weakened it. Blood poured from the wound, and the predator collapsed, its life force draining out rapidly. The creature let out one final growl before it lay still. Silence fell over the arena. The cadets stood frozen, their mouths agape. Jax breathed heavily, his chest rising and falling with the adrenaline that coursed through him. His spear, bloodied but still intact, was a testament to his resourcefulness, and to the power of thinking beyond what others expected. Fellner was the first to speak. His eyes were narrow, his jaw clenched. He was clearly not pleased, but he was also forced to admit something he would never say out loud: Jax had done it. He had succeeded where the others had failed, not with technology, but with human ingenuity. "Well done, Cadet O'Connor," Fellner said, his tone cold but laced with an unwilling respect. "You've survived." "Barely." Jax, breathing hard, wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "I told you. I don't need the fancy tech. Just the right mindset." Fellner's lips curled into a thin, frustrated smile. "Yes, well, let's see if that mindset holds up when the real tests begin." This was only the beginning. Jax didn't respond. He didn't need to. The predator was down, the challenge had been met, and now there was nothing left but the sting of victory. As he left the arena, the cadets' expressions had shifted. Some were still skeptical, others were outright hostile, but there was a quiet recognition now, something different in their eyes. The human had proven himself. Against all odds. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But Jax knew this. Today, he'd made his mark. And the galaxy had seen it. Jax stood in front of the Academy's towering gates, staring out at the barren landscape of Zoxer. The crimson sun hung low on the horizon, casting an eerie glow across the jagged terrain. His thoughts raced, but there was no time to process the victory from earlier. Fellner's words echoed in his mind. This was only the beginning. It was a cold reminder that while the battle against the creature was over, the war for respect had just begun. The other cadets had been silent since the test. The mocking smiles had disappeared, replaced by something more dangerous: curiosity. But in a place where power, status, and technology were everything, curiosity could quickly turn into contempt. Especially when it came to humans. His success had earned him a fleeting moment of acknowledgement, but it wouldn't be enough. Not in the long run. Fellner had made it clear that he didn't view Jax's victory as legitimate. In his eyes, Jax hadn't earned respect through sheer power or tech-driven mastery. He'd used a simple spear. And in the eyes of the Academy's elite, that was nothing more than an insult. "Jax!" a voice called, snapping him out of his thoughts. He turned to see Zorna approaching, her scales glinting in the dimming light. She was no longer sneering. If anything, her posture was more guarded. "You did well with the creature," she said reluctantly, her voice lacking its usual venom. "I wasn't expecting that." Jax raised an eyebrow. "You weren't?" Zorna smirked. "I thought you were just another human with delusions of grandeur. But you're different. Maybe you'll last longer than I thought." "I'm not here to impress you," Jax shot back, his tones steady but blunt. "I'm here to make sure humanity has a place in this galaxy." She studied him for a moment, her golden eyes narrowed. "Just make sure you don't get too comfortable, O'Connor. There are others here who don't like the idea of a human showing them up." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. She was right. There were others who would never accept a human as their equal, especially not after what had just happened. He could feel their gazes on him, the weight of their judgment pressing down on him with every step he took. As Jax made his way toward the training chambers, he noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Whispers followed him, the sound of hushed voices blending with the hum of the Academy's technology. His success had unsettled something deeper than just a simple challenge. Inside the training room, Fellner stood waiting, his eyes cold and assessing. "Cadet O'Connor," he said, his voice sharp. "You think you've proven something. But this isn't the real test. The real test begins now." Jax's grip tightened around the spear as he stepped forward. He had expected this. Fellner had been itching for a way to put him in his place, and now he was going to get his chance. "Another test?" Jax asked. "What is this? You already set the bar with the creature." Fellner's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with contempt. "That was only an assessment of your survival skills. Now I want to see if you can lead. You will face another cadet, someone far more experienced. A real opponent." Jax stiffened. He wasn't concerned about facing a cadet. What worried him was the kind of opponent Fellner had chosen. The Zither instructor knew exactly how to manipulate the situation to his advantage. This wouldn't be a fair fight. It would be another test to break him. Fellner signaled toward the door. "Prepare yourself. You'll be facing Gortok, a Graykle cadet. He's stronger than you. Faster than you. And he doesn't like humans." Jax clenched his jaw, but didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew what he was up against. The Graykle were known for their raw strength and vicious combat tactics. Their four-armed, hulking figures were a formidable sight, and Gortok was one of the Academy's top fighters. The arena was once again set, this time, a simulated battlefield, complete with obstacles, elevated platforms, and even mock terrain. The objective: defeat your opponent. No weapons were allowed, but the cadets had access to their own strength and the environment around them. As the gates of the arena opened, Jax stepped inside, his eyes scanning the battlefield. He could already see Gortok waiting at the far end, his massive frame a blur of muscles and raw power. The Graykle's four arms hung loosely at his sides, his eyes trained on Jax with an expression that suggested he was already calculating how best to destroy him. Gortok's voice rumbled across the arena. "This is going to be fun. I've been waiting for this." Jax didn't waste time. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't beat Gortok in a direct confrontation. But he could outsmart him. He had to. The fight began with a loud clang of Gortok's fists slamming into the ground as he charged forward, his four arms swinging like battering rams. Jax barely managed to dodge, the wind from Gortak's blows whipping through his hair as he rolled to the side. Gortak roared, clearly frustrated by Jax's agility. He swung again, this time with two of his arms, aiming to trap Jax against one of the arena's walls. But Jax was already moving, ducking beneath the incoming strike and weaving around Gortak's hulking body. The Grakel's massive size was both an advantage and a disadvantage. His attacks were powerful, but they lacked the precision and speed Jax had learned to rely on. "Is that all you've got?" Jax taunted, dodging another blow. Gortak growled, his frustration mounting. He charged again, faster this time, his claws outstretched to grab Jax by the throat. But Jax was ready. He sidestepped, using the momentum of Gortak's lunge against him. Jax grabbed a nearby pipe from the ground, a piece of debris left behind from the mock environment. He swung it with both hands, aiming for Gortak's legs. The pipe connected with a solid crack, knocking the Grakel off balance. Gortak stumbled, crashing to the ground with a deafening roar. Jax didn't hesitate. He moved in quickly, using his spear-like weapon to jab at Gortak's exposed side, forcing the larger cadet to retreat. Gortak was on his feet again, but now there was a shift in the dynamic. Jax had made him bleed, something none of the other cadets had been able to do. The arena was alive with the sound of their struggle. Fellner watched with a look of disdain, but even he couldn't deny that Jax was holding his own. Finally, with a quick twist, Jax took advantage of an opening. He darted behind Gortak, using the environment to his advantage. He pushed a piece of the broken arena into the Grakel's path, causing him to trip. Gortak crashed to the ground once again, and Jax quickly used his spear to pin him down, his foot planted on Gortak's chest. "You're not as clever as you think, human," Gortak growled, trying to shake free. Jax didn't reply. He just held the spear firmly in place, waiting for the Grakel to submit. Seconds passed, then minutes. Gortak stopped struggling. "Victory goes to Cadet O'Connor," Fellner announced, his voice cold. Jax stepped back, breathless but victorious. His body ached, his muscles strained, but the battle had been won, not through brute strength, but through patience, strategy, and survival. As he looked down at Gortak, who lay panting on the ground, Jax knew something had shifted. The cadet's perception of him had changed again. And this time, it wasn't just curiosity that filled their eyes, it was respect. The days after his victory over Gortak passed in a strange haze of whispers and stolen glances. Jax could feel it, the shift. The cadets who had once regarded him with thinly veiled contempt now looked at him with something else, caution. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that the Academy, for the first time, was beginning to acknowledge what humans could do, not with fancy gadgets, not with brute force, but with the raw, unshakable will to survive and innovate. Yet there was no time for celebration. The galaxy had bigger problems than a handful of cadets with bruised egos. As Jax walked down the hall, his thoughts lingered on the news he had overheard in the cafeteria earlier. The Voidborn. A name that had been whispered in hushed tones since Jax's arrival at the Academy, a name that sent a chill through even the most hardened cadets. No one knew much about them, just that they were an ancient race, technologically advanced beyond imagination, and rumored to be preparing for war. The last time they had come close to galactic borders, chaos had followed. Jax was jolted out of his thoughts when a hand landed firmly on his shoulder. He turned to find Zorna standing there, her usual scowl replaced by something closer to respect. "You've done well, O'Connor," she said, her voice devoid of the earlier mockery. "For a human, anyway." Jax smiled, though the compliment was laced with condescension. "Thanks, Zorna. That's the nicest thing you've said to me all week." She didn't return the smile, but she didn't seem offended either. "Listen," she said, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "There's talk. About the Voidborn. They're coming, and the higher-ups are preparing. The Academy is supposed to be training us for the worst-case scenario. I don't know if the humans have made their move yet, but just be careful. They're not going to let you coast forever." Jax raised an eyebrow. "You think the Academy is training us for something more than just tests? Like an actual war?" Zorna hesitated before answering. What else would it be? The Void-born aren't some joke. If they come through, no one's going to care about your spear or your agility. They'll want to see real power. Real weapons. Real strategy. Jax wasn't sure if Zorna was trying to intimidate him or warn him. Either way, he appreciated the honesty. He nodded. Thanks for the heads up, Zorna. Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the sea of cadets. Jax felt the weight of her words sink in. The academy had been training them for something, but was it enough? Was he enough? He had no choice but to find out. The next morning, the atmosphere at the academy felt charged with tension. The usual clatter of cadets in the hallways was quieter, more subdued. Jax headed to the briefing room, where Fellner had summoned all cadets for an announcement. As he entered, he could feel the buzz in the air. Something big was happening. Fellner stood at the front of the room, his cold eyes sweeping over the gathered cadets. There was no usual mockery in his tone today, only a kind of grim determination. Cadets, Fellner began. You are about to face a threat unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. The Void-born are no longer rumors. We've confirmed their movements. Scouts have already breached the outer rim of the galaxy. Their technology is unlike anything we've encountered before. Jax felt a chill spread through him at Fellner's words. The Void-born weren't just a theory anymore, they were coming, and the Academy was about to face its first true test. Fellner's eyes locked onto Jax. And this, Cadet O'Connor, is where you'll either prove humanity's worth or seal your fate. The time for simple tactics is over. The Void-born will crush those who don't adapt. We need leaders, strategists. And we need to show the galaxy that humanity isn't a force to be underestimated. Jax stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. Fellner studied him for a long moment, then nodded. We'll see. Over the next few days, the cadets were pushed to their limits. The Academy's focus shifted entirely to preparing for the Void-born, and the simulations grew harsher. Combat drills, tactical exercises, strategic simulations, everything was designed to test their mental and physical endurance. Fellner was a strict taskmaster, and Jax felt the pressure mount with each passing day. But it wasn't just about surviving anymore. Jax could sense the unease in the other cadets. Fear had started to creep in, and with it, a sense of competition unlike anything he had seen before. This wasn't just about grades anymore. This was about survival. Who would be the last one standing? Jax spent his nights in the simulation chambers, running scenarios over and over in his mind. The Void-born would not be defeated by strength alone. They would need to be outsmarted, outmaneuvered. And Jax knew that if there was one thing humanity had in spades, it was adaptability. He had learned that lesson the hard way, and now it was his turn to teach others. His team, what was left of it, gathered in the strategy room one evening. Zorna was there, along with a few others who had earned Jax's respect. You think we stand a chance? Zorna asked, her arms crossed, her gaze locked on the holographic display of the Void-born fleet in the simulation. Jax didn't hesitate. We don't need to beat them head-on. We need to use what we have, our creativity. We've been taught that bigger is better, but that's not always true. If we think small, think tactical, we might just have a shot. Zorna gave him a skeptical look, but then nodded. If you can convince the others, we might just pull this off. They spent hours planning, hashing out the details of their strategy. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. As the group dispersed for the night, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The Void-born would be here soon. The following week, Fellner gathered the cadets for one final simulation. The scenario was clear. The Void-born had launched a full-scale attack on the Academy's outer defenses. Cadets were tasked with protecting key areas of the compound, and holding the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Jax's team was assigned a vital sector, an exposed communications tower that would be key to coordinating the defense. The stakes were higher than ever. Cadets, Fellner's voice boomed across the briefing room. This is the last chance to prove that humanity belongs in this fight. You either show your worth now, or you are expendable. Jax's grip tightened on his weapon, his mind racing. The time for proving himself was over. This was it. The galaxy would either recognize humanity's strength, or it would write them off as insignificant. But Jax knew something that Fellner didn't. Humanity was at its strongest when it was underestimated. The simulation began. Jax's team immediately went to work, setting traps and laying false trails to confuse the enemy. They didn't have the firepower the Voidborn had, but they had the one thing that counted the most: ingenuity. Every move they made was calculated, every decision designed to force the Voidborn into a vulnerable position. As the battle raged on, Jax saw his plan unfolding. The Voidborn's superior firepower was useless against their strategy. The tide was turning. When the simulation ended, Jax stood panting, watching the holographic simulation collapse into a quiet aftermath. His team had held their ground. They had proven that humanity, despite being young and primitive, could stand alongside the greatest forces in the galaxy. Fellner's eyes locked with Jax's, a grudging respect finally flickering in his cold gaze. "You've earned your place," Fellner said quietly, his voice low but genuine. "This was just the beginning." Jax didn't respond. He didn't need to. The Academy had seen what humanity could do. And so had the galaxy.